Welcome to another episode of the Political Power Hour. So we enjoyed so much last week not having the headphones on that we don't have them on again this week, and I am joined in studio with Brooke van Velden.
Hey guys.
So Brooke, I put on the little promo that we put out before the show that you're act number 3. Is that correct?
Technically, yes. So the way it works is the list exists right until the next election. Okay. So at the last election in 2017, I was listed number 3.
Yeah.
So that means I'm number 3 until the next list.
Okay.
That hasn't been confirmed. There's no date yet. I think it's sometime in May or June. And then it's actually a really tricky process.
Yeah.
You know, the ACT Party has to send out to all of the membership, you know, a form with people who want to be in the top 20 and say, okay, list them how you think they should be.
Yeah.
And then after that, there's 9 members of the board.
Okay.
And they all get together and say, okay, well, how do we want to rank it 1, 2, 3, all the way down?
Okay. So your board ranks it?
The board ranks it as well, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it's kind of like a little bit of, you know, how the Greens work it, where they send everything out to the membership.
I don't know how any of your parties work. I don't
but
sit
either
down
way,
and study your constitution.
Yeah, so there's the ability for the members to have their say,
Right.
but also the board to have their say as well. Right. So they kind of work together.
So
that
the
hasn't been set in stone yet.
The potential then is you could potentially be number 2.
Oh.
That's number 1's the leader. I don't think David's going anywhere.
I don't know. Maybe I'll challenge him for the Epsom seat.
Oh my God. If that's
that's a joke, David. That's a joke if you're listening in. I didn't mean that.
Well, he spoke very highly of you when we had him on the podcast, which is how this came to be, because as I said to him, I've got a lot of time for you, and he said you should definitely grab her and put her on the podcast. But you, since you're not a politician yet, you know, you're not an MP member.
That's correct. I'm glad you said that, because so many people say, oh, Brooke the politician, when they introduce me to things. I'm like, hang on, guys, I don't get paid to do that.
So what is your role currently?
So my title is I'm Political and Media Director of the ACT Leader's Office in Parliament. Yeah. So David has a budget, being the ACT Leader, and he's brought me on board to help him, you know, with policy advice and et cetera. For the term.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, wow. Okay. Do you enjoy it?
I love it.
Yeah?
Yeah. I mean, Wellington is a pretty different city.
Yeah.
So it took a bit of time to get used to that, just, you know, consistently being around people whose entire lives are just absorbed by politics.
Yeah.
I mean, that was completely new to me.
Yeah. So where did you come from? Auckland?
Yeah. So I was always born and raised in Auckland. I love it up here.
Yeah.
I do miss it, especially like you go outside and it's actually sunny.
Yeah.
I mean, that is the biggest thing I miss.
And not windy.
It's not windy. Yeah, so you can wear dresses. But mainly just like it's sunny, people seem happy. Yeah. It's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool. So, do you usually stand in an electorate when you run?
Yeah, so I've only run once, and that was in Auckland Central.
Okay.
This time I'm not sure, because I was living in Auckland Central. Okay. I was in an apartment there for about 3 years.
Yeah.
Now I'm based in Wellington Central. I could stand there, but also I'm up to wherever the board thinks it would be best for me to go, you know, to maybe have someone in the top list rankings, you know, where they think they can, you know, where it could work the best.
And so you're up in Auckland as well as being on the Political Power Hour.
Of course. My main reason to be here. to chat with you, Holly.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good. Is to also participate in the Pride Parade.
Correct.
So when is that? Is that Sunday?
No, it's tomorrow night.
It's tomorrow night.
Oh, sorry, no, it's not. It's Saturday. Sorry, I thought it was Friday for a second. It's been a long week.
Well, I must make clear that Brooke is a little bit under the weather, so stoked that she turned out to come and be on the show.
There are no sick days in politics.
Exactly. And so that's why she's got a big Mickey Mouse box of tissues in front of her, just in case. So it's just in case.
Yeah.
So what do you have a whole bunch of people turning out for the Pride Parade? Like, is that something big on ACT's agenda? Like, talk to me about that. What?
Yeah, so ACT, a lot of people just lump us in the right. Mm-hmm. You know, they go, oh, well, they're kind of, right to national and think, oh, well, that's like a really big spectrum and it comes with like social conservatism.
Yeah.
But it really doesn't. Like, it's got no correlation at all. We're actually incredibly liberal when it comes to how people should live their lives.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, it's your life, it's your choice, it's up to you. As long as you don't harm someone else, you're free to be whoever you want. Yeah. So the youth wing in particular are really, really big on social issues. And so we've got this big banner and it says freedom to be me.
Yeah.
And so I think this is the first year that we're actually actively in the Pride Parade.
Yeah.
And so I think there's about 70 people or so, coming out from the ACT Party and saying, hey, we're here to support you. We know this is a huge issue for the Youth Party. And so here we are.
So the first year ever, what would you say to them people who are going to perceive that? Because politics is a lot about perception of that being just electioneering. Oh,
totally. I can see that. The difference really is that the youth wing itself didn't really exist when I was a student.
Yeah.
So when I was coming through, I didn't know anyone from the ACT Party.
Yeah.
At all. Yeah. Like, I knew a couple of young Nats.
I was going to say, surely you knew John Banks.
No, I didn't know Banksy.
What?
No. Because I wasn't involved in student politics.
Blasphemy.
I thought most of those people were a bit weird, to be honest, until I became friends with some. So I had some like young Labour friends and stuff on campus, but there wasn't really an ACT, and so I had to go to the big party to get my answers. Yeah. Which is how I got involved in that instead of going to the youth wing. But once I left uni, we've seen this huge resurgence in youth membership. I mean, we've got a couple of hundred kids nationwide, whereas when I was there, it was like 10 or 20. And so, they've started up clubs. The membership is growing. But alongside that, they've actually said, hey, we want some policy platforms of our own. We want our own voice. And so they have a kind of like a separate constitution. They can do whatever they want. Yeah. May not align with the party sometimes, and that's fine because that's up to them. But this is a big issue for them, and obviously there's a huge growth, and so why not support it?
Has there been anything since the establishment of it that they've disagreed with the main party on, like the youth one?
Not too heavily. I think there's been a few things where they might not like a meme that goes up online or something, but there's no policy issues that I can really think of.
So one thing I was just going to do, so for any of our viewership that's probably 55, 60 and above,
sure,
will they have understanding of what a meme is?
Right, okay, yeah. Yeah, so a meme is essentially a picture that goes online and it explains something that's funny in a political way, but uses the context of something that's going on in society. Yeah. And then, it just kind of takes it down from a whole concept into like 3 or 4 words in a picture, and people laugh at it.
So let's bring that back to the other side of the conversation, which is some of the terminology about conservatism, liberalism. Mm-hmm. A lot of the things that I find are that those terms mean pretty much nothing to our generation.
Yep.
So do you want to just extrapolate on that a little bit for our audience? Because one of the things that Political Power Hour tries to do is to sort of humanize politics, which can be a very dehumanizing thing because it is all these concepts and leaders and arguments.
Yeah, no, you're right. And to be fair, I probably had no idea about any of this until I entered politics myself. Just happens that I just hang out with a whole bunch of political hacks now.
and we just take it for granted that we know what the stuff means,
and you pick up on some of the lingo, and then you forget that normal people don't know what that is.
Even the left and right terminology.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's the liberal word in some ways, is tied to left-wing politics. Somehow that has happened, and then I think it's something to do with American politics. Mm-hmm, you've got the liberals and the conservatives, and you're either a Republican or a Democrat. Yeah. And that doesn't really fit here. So you've got, your supposed, I guess, left-wing, which would term liberal, are the ones who they like state intervention, but they also seem to say, okay, we want people to be able to do whatever they want with their bodies. So that you've got those two. And then on the right, you've typically got people saying, okay, well, back off. This is my company. This is my body. It's all about choice. Yeah. And so they say, I don't want the state interfering even with my business or my personal life. But alongside that, a lot of people who are, seen as on the side of business typically are kind of smeared with this, you have to be, less socially progressive. You have to be against abortion, against gay rights, all of that sort of stuff. Whereas we don't really fit with that. So we would consider ourselves liberal because, we're pro-choice on a whole range of issues.
Including a big one that we are going to dive into shortly.
Oh, good.
Because for everyone listening, this person to my right, so on the left of your screens, is an absolute dynamo. I know I use that term, but a dynamo in terms of the political wrangling that she's done behind the scenes in a certain piece of legislation. So we are going to talk about that. But I thought it was really good to give everyone a little bit of context if it's people who are generally not interested in politics, sort of where you sit on the spectrum and the things that you represent. Because if we're using old school terminology, I just think it doesn't really.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so I would consider myself someone who wants the government to kind of stay out of people's businesses, stay out of people's lives, and, let people actually live how they want to live. Yeah. And that ties back into what I've been doing for the last 2 years of my life.
So before we jump into that, what I am going to do is I'm going to give you a letter from our previous guests.
Oh, great.
So something that I do every episode is I get our guests to write a note to the upcoming guest. And so last week we had Vernon Tava on from Sustainable New Zealand.
Yep, I've met Vernon before.
Yeah. Yep. And so he... Actually, where would you say he would sit on the spectrum? Centre?
Probably. I mean, it is a bit confusing because he was a member of the Greens and then he moved to the National Party and now he started his own party. Yeah. So I would say he's somewhere in the middle, but not quite sure where.
So he wrote you a note. So we'll take that and open that up.
So his handwriting or yours?
It's his.
Oh, that's very nice. Actually, I'm terrible.
Are you saying that Vernon has girly handwriting?
I am, actually. I'm terrible at opening envelopes, so...
We're all judging you because of that, too.
Yeah, this is how I open all the presents at Christmas, too. It's a waste. Okay. So you want me to read it out?
Yes, please.
Okay. Hi, Brooke. Congratulations on your skilled advocacy on the end-of-life choice bill. Well, wishing you the best of luck in your tilt at Parliament. I think it's tilt. At number 3, you may well get there. All the best, Vernon.
Oh, that's nice.
It is very sweet.
And
Thanks, Vernon.
Oh, it really segues into the next topic that we're going to talk about, which is the end-of-life choice bill. Now, for those of you tuned in, it's an election year. You all know that. Something that you are going to be voting on and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, for sure.
You are going to be voting on it's a referendum question, right? Is it?
Yes, the referendum question already exists.
Okay. And then on the right to
yeah. So what happens is when is the election?
19th of September.
Well done. Okay, I'm glad we got that one. That's good. get that out of the way. So on the 19th of September, it is the general election.
Yeah.
So everyone will get out and vote for which party they want,
Yeah.
which MP they want to represent them in their area. But then there's 2 important questions on there as well, which is really unusual. You've got, do you want the cannabis bill that's going forward? And then there is, do you support the End of Life Choice Act 2019 coming into force? And so that is really, really important that everyone votes yes. But yeah, hopefully I can lead you through what that actually is. But it's been all the way through Parliament. So it's an assisted dying. Some people call it euthanasia. Some people call it assisted suicide. We lump the term as assisted dying because, it's about a person being able to have a doctor assist them if they're terminally ill to end their life within their last few days, or they can do it themselves. So that's where those 2 terms come in.
Yeah.
So we've put them together as assisted dying. But yeah, sorry, I forgot where I was at the beginning of my sentence.
No. So talk to me about, so we'll term it assisted dying.
Yeah.
But the act, which is important because it's not a bill, it's now an act.
Yes. Yeah, so it's already passed through Parliament.
Yeah.
All of the MPs got together and said, yep, we are happy for this to be taken to the public now.
Yeah.
So pretty much the entire regime exists in a few bits of paper that you can find on the legislation website if you're really good and you want to go and see like clause by clause. And then from there, pretty much the politicians just said, it's passed, we want this, but we also want to leave it up to the public. We want you guys to decide whether it should or should not be, because this is a big issue. Some people will say it's controversial, but it's been deemed as like a conscience vote.
Yeah.
So some of the MPs in Parliament said, I do want to vote for this, but I'm not sure about it myself, but I feel more comfortable if maybe I left it up to the people in my electorate. I don't want to make that decision for them.
Yeah. So talk me through when this whole thing started.
Well, it's a big process. So David Seymour, he had a members' bill in Parliament.
Yeah.
And that's, so you got the government of the day making legislation all the time, but there's people who aren't in the government, they're on the opposition, or they might be a backbencher. So they're allowed to also come up with ideas.
Yeah.
We don't have like this... only the 20 people in power,
only the
make a law.
ministers.
Yeah. So they can put in an idea to what's called the biscuit tin.
Yeah.
And
which we have talked about that on the show before. So hopefully viewers, if they've been keeping up with the episodes, will know exactly what the biscuit tin is.
Yeah, and you can go and watch it being pulled out as well, and it's really fun. There's actually a huge amount of people who go and watch. For all the political nerds. But from there, in 2017, David's idea got pulled out. And so that was massive.
Yeah.
This is the first time in history, I think, we've got this far. There's been 2 other people in the past who have had it voted in Parliament and shot down.
Who's that?
So that was Michael Laws and Peter Brown.
Okay.
So this is going back to the 90s and 2000s.
Yeah.
Both those times public support was in favour,
but
the politicians didn't quite have the guts to get there.
Okay.
So this time we've finally done it.
Yeah. So in 2017 there was an election. Was David on the opposition benches, or was he on the government benches?
So he was in the government.
Yeah.
So he wasn't a minister.
Yeah.
He was an under-secretary.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like a fancy term for someone who sits just below a minister, has not quite had as much responsibility.
Yeah.
But he was part of the government with the National Party.
Yeah.
But he intentionally wasn't a minister because a minister can't have a members' bill.
Right.
And so the minister has to, promote the ideas of the day of the government.
Yeah.
You can't just come up with your own one.
Yeah.
And so David was offered one. He was offered to be a minister,
Yeah.
And he said, no, I actually really want to prioritise this as my issue, and I want to pass it.
So then when the election happened, and then obviously the government of the day came in, is that when you started with working down in Wellington and the party and everything?
Yeah, so I came down in end of 2017, and it was a my God, it was a whirlwind of trying to figure out everything in the political system down there so quickly.
Yeah.
Because we never expected the bill to come up as quick as it did.
Yeah.
You know, I was only working there, I think, less than a month.
Yeah.
And we were voting on the first reading.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was challenging. I had to get my head around all of the legislation and every single thing it meant, and David's intentions with every word that was in it, so that, you know, we could go to members of parliament and say, hey, we want your vote for this.
Yeah.
If you've got questions, here we are.
So it really was a baptism by fire.
It really was.
And then do you remember what votes you got in that first reading? Can you remember?
Can I remember? It was 76-44.
Wow.
First reading.
Okay. Interesting.
Yep.
Okay. And then so the process is it then went to select committee?
Yeah. So, the longest time of my life. It was 16 months, nearly 17 months.
That it was before select committee?
Before select committee. I think it's the longest select committee potentially in history.
Yeah.
It definitely had the most public submissions in history. There was I think it was around 30,000 potentially.
That's phenomenal.
Yeah, it all feels like such a long time ago, but also so recent as well. But yeah, as soon as the first reading, so the first reading is really just, you know, an indication of whether Parliament actually wants to debate this idea or not.
Yeah.
You know, they can shoot it down and say, no, that's for a government of another day.
Yeah.
Or they can say, yep, all right, let's actually debate this thing. So they voted that through. And then it goes to select committee, which is when all of the members of the public can have their say.
So this is an important note if you're watching with us at home, that select committee is an important part of the parliamentary process.
Hugely so.
And it's where you can have your say on any piece of proposed law that comes before Parliament.
Yeah. And, I mean, you can go online to the Select Committee's page of Parliament and see everything that's asking for public submissions, what your point or what your idea is or your vision for the future on a particular issue. And you can, if you wish, go all the way down to Parliament and talk in person about it. I think they give them 5 to 15-minute slots, depending on how long your submission is.
Yeah.
So this was the first time in history that we tried to hear from every single person that wanted to be heard orally, which meant it took a very long time.
So how many people submitted that wanted to be heard
It was
orally?
around 3,000.
That's phenomenal.
Of course, not all of them turned up. I think it was only about half who actually did want to in the end. Some of them may have changed their minds. But I just think of the people trying to, you know, fix up all those meetings. And I feel very sorry for them. Yeah. But yeah, so that was all of 2018. Yeah, 2018 for me. And so David and I travelled around the country, independent of the select committee. We went to 27 different towns. Yeah. And we put on these night meetings where he would discuss the bill. Yeah. And there'd be someone from the opposition and David would crush them. It was great. And then, most importantly, people would stand up and say, you know, I've been affected by this in some way, share their stories. It was really heartbreaking, some of them. But I really appreciated it. I think it's changed my outlook, really.
How has it changed your outlook?
Well, I just, you know, it's very humbling. You know, a lot of people for the first time would be telling their stories to someone, or they'd notice me down the back because I'd be handing out the little leaflets. You know, it had like a little, a little A4 about what's in the legislation, and then come up to me afterwards, being a young, fresh face or something. They just, you know, open their hearts and talk about, you know, the death of their mother or their brother or something. And I really took all of that on board and tried to make the best bill possible. Yeah. Because I didn't want some things that people were saying, like, oh, I'm really worried about people with dementia, or, you know, what am I supposed to do about people who want to commit suicide, and all these things. And you have to take that all into consideration. It's not easy creating a piece of legislation. Yeah. And then saying, okay, well, we can keep these people safe and we can help these people. Yeah. But there's so many people that I wish I could have helped. Yeah. But they have helped form the legislation.
And those public meetings, they got very heated.
Oh,
right?
yeah, some of them did, yeah.
Because I remember I went to one in Waikato, and I remember sitting down the back because I just wanted to listen and see what...
Did you have a question?
Did I have a question? I think I did. I think my question was about a supplementary order paper. Oh, no, an alternative bill. Oh, here we're getting which I think the Honourable Maggie Barry was talking about. And I wanted to clarify for everyone whether or not that was actually before Parliament to be considered or whether it was just an idea.
Yeah. So Maggie is a great friend of mine. I wish her all the best in her post-parliamentary career.
Yeah.
She is hugely against this bill.
Okay.
I mean, it became her life's mission, essentially, to try and shut it down for 2 years. But she decided to create an alternative. And it was completely against assisted dying. It was just, we should create measures in Parliament to, tell the ministers of Parliament what's happening with palliative care funding.
Okay. How is that different to what we've got now?
It's not really. I mean, it could be good in some ways to, show how much money is being spent on certain things.
Okay.
And also palliative care is important.
Yes.
And so I think the whole idea was she's really passionate about palliative care, and good on her. But these are they are separate issues, but also they work together.
Yeah.
I mean, when you look at assisted dying regimes overseas, palliative care funding has actually increased because they work together. But her point really was the opposite, is that everyone should have palliative care at the end of their life. And if everyone has that, then there's no need for assisted dying because everyone will die wonderfully. But we know that's not true.
No, exactly. So after you went through the whole select committee process, were there changes that you guys made based on public feedback?
Yeah, there were. There were also changes that we made due to the feedback that we had from parliamentary colleagues as well.
Yeah. What was some of that? Can you give us any examples?
Yeah, so the Greens Party in particular, they told us, we're supportive, but we cannot support a bill that allows for people who are non-terminal for assisted dying. So we had two tracks really in the first draft. You could have a terminal illness, or you could have what's called a grievous and irremediable medical condition.
Okay.
And so that was to be for people like who have Parkinson's or Huntington's disease, where they degenerate over time. Yeah. And it was a wonderful woman that I was in touch with called Rachel Reitmar in Christchurch. And her story is heartbreaking. She got Huntington's disease, and she was pregnant at the time when she found out, and decided to have an abortion because there was no way that she would have a life long enough, to actually raise her child properly. And so she's in, I think they call it respite care. So she's looked after 24/7. Can't do anything, and she's slowly losing even the ability to speak. So she's been really, really vocal, getting it out there now that this is something that she would have actually wanted for herself. So those sorts of clauses were put in there for people like Rachel.
Right.
They've got everything is fine with their mind.
Yeah.
But they just know that the end is going to be unbearable.
Yeah.
And she just didn't want that. So it's really unfortunate, but knowing that we needed to get at least 61 votes, because you've got to get a parliamentary majority to pass law, we couldn't risk losing the Greens for that. Yeah. So we had to cut that. But also people who had concerns about, disability community, for example, they said, well, what happens if I turn up to the doctor and I'm having a bad day and I say I want to kill myself? Could I potentially go all the way through this assisted dying process? And the answer is no. It's not possible in the legislation if you look through the clauses. But of course, not everyone knows, how to read pieces of legislation.
What do you mean not everyone? Like 99% of people, because they have lives.
Yeah, I know. These normal people. Yeah, so normal people don't sit down and they go, oh, well, there's a definition in the definitions section and that links to clause 24 or something.
I worked in policy, so I didn't even do that.
And so we said, okay, we'll make a change.
Yeah.
We can make it really explicit that it says that you cannot access assisted dying just because you have a disability.
Yeah.
Or just because you're old.
Yes.
Or just because you have a mental health condition. And so that's alleviated a lot of people's fears, which is really good.
If you look at it from that original spectrum then that we were talking about, left and right, you really then have a pragmatic solution, like pathway forward from a piece of controversial legislation, contentious probably actually is a better word, legislation by the two parties that are frankly declared the furthest away from one another. Greens.
Yeah, it is funny in that respect, isn't it?
Well, I just think that's that lots of people think that you can't actually make pragmatic decisions in politics.
Yeah, I think there's this idea that, people are so staunch in their views they're unwilling to work with anyone. And David has shown with this piece of legislation, sure, he might have some views that some people don't agree with, but when we actually do need to work, we are willing to, cooperate and, be good members of a team.
So were there any points that you can just remember that were the lowest of the low as you were going through this process?
The lowest of the low.
I think, you can often, you can remember the really high points and the really low points, right?
I'm trying to think. I probably blocked a lot of them, to be honest. There were, the just constant select committee hearings. It just felt like it dragged on forever, and it kept getting extended as well. And I remember actually having some dreams at the time, and you're working too much when you start dreaming about work.
Yeah.
But I actually had a dream where I woke up and I thought we had passed the legislation because select committees didn't exist. And we had gone straight to a second reading and we'd passed that. And I woke up and I went, oh God, we've got another 4 months to go.
You were so relieved, and then all of a sudden you weren't again.
And I went, I need a holiday. There was that. I'd say some of the low points also just, how long it dragged through. So, you had the select committee. Once we got through that, it still wasn't easy. We still had the second reading. That's just one day. That's one vote. That's easy. Then we had committee of the whole house.
Yeah.
That was a nightmare.
So we need to explain to everyone what committee of the whole house is.
Yeah, so once you've done all of the public submissions and you've taken on board public feedback and you've made some changes, you then have to convince people that they like that change.
Yeah.
They like that piece of legislation. So the MPs vote on that and it passed. Then all the MPs are allowed to talk in the House for as long as they want.
Committee of the whole.
Committee of the whole House. There is no limitation. As long as there is a new point being raised every time, Parliament could, it could go on indefinitely in Committee of the whole House with MPs just debating an issue. So that happened for about 5 months, I think. And that wasn't fun.
No.
Because there was about 100 amendments that people put up.
Okay.
Majority by Maggie Barry. Yeah. And she had this great idea that she could try and extend the bill right out through to a point where a referendum wouldn't be possible because the Electoral Commission wouldn't be able to get the forms done in time and stuff.
Okay.
And so she could delay the whole thing for another 3 years by kind of just pushing it out as far as possible. Thankfully, she wasn't able to do that because there's actually not that much you can talk about. But it did go for a very, very long time. And I would have to sit in the office and the amendments would come through at 4:00.
In the afternoon?
Yep, just before a debate which started around 4:00 and work through about, I'd say there would be 20 amendments at a time and have to list everything bad with it, everything good with it, everything that is already addressed by legislation that exists, and so therefore this amendment isn't needed. It's not possible. And then run all the way to the chamber and hand David notes about, why this amendment's bad so he could stand up and respond to it. And they did that intentionally so David would look like he didn't know what he was talking about. But thankfully we got such a good system in place that he was able to just knock them all out of the park, which is great.
So I guess that's one of the sides of politics that people don't really see. And I imagine a lot of our audience is younger, definitely politically motivated. I wouldn't necessarily say politically aligned. They're just motivated to learn more about politics. If there's anyone out there that's listening that's interested in politics, you're bringing a really interesting lens. What would the advice be to them?
Advice for young people interested in getting involved in politics like and almost, party politics.
Or even just more in this sort of like, this is a significant part of what, you know, a political advisor is required to do.
Yep.
But no one sees, and you rarely ever get to talk about it.
Oh, to be honest, most people are completely bored when I talk about it. So it's great having you here, and you have to sit here. That's great. Yeah, I mean, it's something that even I didn't realize, you know. When I took on the job, I didn't know, you know, at 2 o'clock the bells ring and you have to file through the black and white tiles and all these things. There are all these little bits that you just learn on the job.
Yeah.
There is an internship program for people who go to Vic Uni.
Okay.
I know that. So if you're interested in doing politics, the best place, to be honest, is Vic.
Yeah.
Because the ministers and backbenchers, you know, they get the choice through Vic Uni to pick someone who's doing a politics course and have them, like, shadow them in their office.
Yeah.
And so I think that would be really fascinating.
Yeah.
Because that was something I didn't even know was possible.
Yeah.
Apart from that, how would you get involved?
Well, would you recommend this as a career, having been through what sounds like a relatively, not traumatic, because that's probably too strong.
No, it was a lot of fun as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you had like these really stressful moments, and then you'd be like, I can't believe we did that.
Yeah.
It's great. Pat on the back.
Yeah.
Next day.
Yeah.
Yep.
So talk to me as well, because one of the things as a political advisor, you know, and working as a staff or across Parliament, is that you generally try to stay out of the news. And you've had a big news spread done on you where they've called you a lobbyist, which you and I both know that's what I do for my career anyway.
So I do know that.
I actually have that title. Talk to me about that. Being like...
Yeah, I know you are a lobbyist because that's how I got to know you.
Yay!
Yeah.
Talk to me about your news article, you know, how that came about and sort of...
Well, it was strange in some ways. So I think, David mentioned it on the show the other day. Most political staffers get in the news for bad things. Yeah. And I never thought someone would actually write an article about my job. But it just happened that, you know, with the amount of work I was doing in Parliament, I was constantly walking through the corridors, talking to different MPs, talking to the different journalists, because, you know, not only was I, for this project, you know, the advisor and then part-time drafter for legislation, you know, with proper
council,
like big gun legal teams. I also had to deal with like the media side as well. And so I'd be walking through, because in Parliament as well, you've got these media officers. And if you really need a story or you want, you know, to put something out there or let the news know what's happening, you walk straight into their offices and tell them what's happening, quickly sneak out as they're all, you know, typing away. And so, my name got around them as well as, oh, this is Brooke, she's got the numbers, she knows what's going on. If I have any questions about end of life choice, I just call her up.
Yeah.
And so external to even those officers, people, you know, who are other friends of journalists kept talking. Yeah. And so I met the editor for Sunday Star Times, and she was really interested in getting, you know, a feature piece on me because she thought it was really exciting, the work that we're doing. And to be honest, it's pretty much a once-in-a-generation piece of legislation to work on. Yeah. So I can see how it was interesting. So that's how that happened. But, I'm not a lobbyist. And I was very clear that I just communicate.
Yeah.
And I try and get things done.
And you were advocating for that bill.
Yeah, I was an advocate for the bill, but I can see how it would look like I was a lobbyist, because technically I was walking down lobbies trying to talk to people.
And then so everyone that's going to vote is going to be able to vote on this referendum question on 19th of September, or early if they do early voting.
Oh, God, yeah.
take us back to the final vote. What was it that went through the House?
69. We got 69 in favour, so that's 51 opposed.
Okay.
Is it? Yes, I think so.
I don't know.
I was only concerned with the big number.
69. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so that was the crucial day. So yeah, that was probably one of the most stressful days of my life.
Yeah.
But we also knew that there wasn't too much more that we could do. Yeah. And that was the first day where I was pushed back out of my job from the chamber. Mm-hmm. And so I felt like real restricted because the speaker had given me permission to sit in the chamber pretty much next to David so that I could just be on call for advice at any time. Because usually...
Yeah, wait, talk to me about that, because that's something I didn't know. So you were able to sit in the chamber during House time.
Yeah.
So if you were one of the only strangers that were allowed, basically.
I know, it was pretty cool. But
this is where everyone out there is realising what a political geek I am, because I'm like, that's so exciting.
Yeah, and it was because what we've done is actually incredibly hard.
Yeah.
It has been a massive undertaking with such a small team. Yeah. But usually if you've got a minister who's got a piece of legislation, you've got, a couple of advisors, and then they've got their own advisors and stuff in their entire ministries with thousands of people.
And the officials.
And their officials, and they've got their legal drafters. And we didn't have any of that because as an opposition party, you don't get that.
No.
You don't get those staff. So I was doing all of those jobs in one. Mm-hmm. And so typically when a minister is in the chamber and they're talking about their own piece of legislation that all the people behind them have created, they have some people on the bench who can be called on for when the minister goes, oh, I don't know what's in clause 6. The person will write them a quick note. And so I went to the officials, so that's like the Speaker of the House and the clerk. He's a guy in the shadows, it's great. But I said to them, look, we don't have any of that stuff.
Yeah.
Can I do that? And they said, yep, that makes sense.
Yep.
And so I sat in there and could hear everything going on, which was perfect, and watch which way people were going in and out of the voting lobbies, which was really good, and had all my spreadsheets and everything in front of me, so that was very helpful.
And so you said for the final vote they didn't let you sit there.
Yeah, and so I'd kind of gotten used to being there and being able to see everything and know, you can see people's reactions and their emotions, and that's really important. And then for the last final vote, I went, I can't be in there. I've got to be up with all the members of the public again.
Yeah.
And I went, but how am I supposed to do that? And also field media calls and things because you're not allowed your phone up in the public gallery.
Yeah.
So I went, oh no, maybe I'm not even going to watch this piece of legislation pass. I mean, wouldn't that be horrible?
Yeah.
And so once again, wrote to the people and who are in charge of the buildings and said, hello, please help. I want to do everything. I can't do all of these things and sit down the back somewhere.
And
they
what
says,
do they do?
oh, yeah, we'll give you special permission. You can have your phone in your pocket when you're inside watching.
Yeah.
But you're going to have to leave to look at it.
Yeah.
But it means that you don't have to go all the way down through corridors to security and pick up your phone again and everything. But just as long as you're not actually looking at it in the chamber and you leave, you can come back and forth. I went, phew, thank goodness.
See, you got
because I could feel it in my pocket. Someone would be speaking and they'd say something and you're like, wow, that's a really good speech. And then your phone was like, zzz, 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 and you're like, I think that's a journalist wanting to know who that was.
Yeah.
Or
seek some comment. Yeah.
Yeah, and you run outside and you go, okay, there we go.
These are all the nuances of Parliament that I think a lot of people don't understand, and unless they take the plunge of working on precinct, they'll never understand. So it's amazing to sort of hear in behind the scenes. I think that's why you should definitely not play down the momentous task that you achieved with this piece of law.
Yeah, well, thank you. It is interesting though, because it is literally been the only thing I have done in Parliament. And so some people could spend years working for people in Parliament and never feel like they've achieved anything. And I can easily leave now and feel like I've helped change the country's history.
Yeah.
So that's incredible.
Yeah.
But I think also, what I've experienced is completely different to what a normal staffer would. A normal staffer would like research for an MP. They might not necessarily be given the independence that David let me have, which was, I pay you to advise me, so advise me, as opposed to, this is my thoughts, now write it for me. So I think that is really different. I mean, David is a really cool boss. Yeah. And, I've just been so lucky with the experience I've had.
So what's the next step, hopefully, for you looks like sitting in a seat alongside David?
We could see. I mean,
like not at the official bench. I mean, forward in a seat.
I mean, you could ask David his thoughts on that. We could get him on the phone now if you want.
I've already had him. He can't have any more airtime. That's it.
Nah. So I'm not committed to standing again at the election. Yeah. But I'm still thinking about it really, really strongly. I mean, the polls are looking really, really good. Yeah. I'm still committed to the ACT Party. Yeah. I've just got to do some serious thinking.
So we have got 12, 13 minutes. So
that went quick.
Yeah, well, see, thank you for sharing everything. Yeah. So what we're going to do is that I always get my guests to talk about the top 5 issues in the news. So like the top 5 issues of the day.
Right, and this is where I pop in and say I was on my deathbed for 2 days.
I think they're all things that have been bubbling around for a while, so you'll probably have views.
All right, I'll take a stress drink.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just really interested in your whakaaro on some of these things, like what you think, not necessarily as an ACT Party representative, but just as yourself. Like what thoughts that you have. So the first one is coronavirus, and this wasn't a topic that I talked about last week, but every other episode before that I've talked about it every single week. But it's come back up now because it seems to be having a bit of an impact on the world economy. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think it might be like the push go button, or maybe the next recession or something like that?
I think it has the potential for that. This is something that I've been following because, when it first popped up, I went, oh dear, so much of our economy is based around China that this is going to have a huge flow-on effect. And my thoughts actually went to, well, if this is what can happen with just a couple of weeks of, a couple of little travel bans here and there, some exporters not being able to export their products, what would happen if China turned around tomorrow and just closed its border on us? And so my thoughts have really just been on, we better sign as many free trade agreements with everyone around the world as much as possible. Yeah.
It's no small feat, but it's a good goal.
Get to it, government. Come on.
The next thing is it's been announced today by the government that the wholesale fuel market is going to be regulated. Without getting into detail, because I imagine that there's a lot of policy stuff here that we don't need to talk about.
Could be quite boring.
Do you have any sort of thoughts on that, especially the regulation part?
Yeah, I mean, I've only ever seen this briefly. Yeah. But my understanding is they've gone, hey, petrol companies, you get too much profit. That's not good. We're gonna regulate you and make sure that you have competition in the market, and maybe that'll drive down the price of fuel a bit. But they've completely forgotten that majority of the money that's causing the fuel prices to go up is just tax. Yeah. So maybe the government should just tax less fuel, and then people would have more money in their pockets. It could be that simple.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know. I don't know. It's just interesting. It's something that's happened. Political donations. This is always tricky.
Yeah, this is a big one.
There's been 2 parties that I've seen swirling around with political donations, which are National and New Zealand First. Yep. Do you have any thoughts on political donations?
Yeah, I mean, it does sound dodgy. Let's not be too about the bush with that one. It's kind of, it is really saddening to think that people who are running our country and creating our laws are the ones trying to break them. And we're not talking about like some guy having a bit of pot on the weekend or something. We're talking about like proper fraud. And that is, that's pretty outrageous to me. And I think what I really want to be clear on is, like, with Jamie Lee, a lot of people are trying to paint him as, like, he was doing this all by himself. I can't see how you could be such a high up person in the National Party like that and be like some rogue unit. And I think that's kind of how everything's going to be played. But I just don't really buy this whole, well, he just did this all by himself. I mean, someone had to know something.
I guess the argument would be is that the Serious Fraud Office has looked into it and they've only charged him and 3 others. So
do you see, though, that he says he's got more evidence? I can't wait.
Oh, gosh.
I can't wait. Every time he has more evidence, the hole gets bigger.
For me, who's really interested in politics, just in a general sense, it just does create this big distraction for me when you try to share, like, your whakaaro of what you've done, of, you know, which is now an act, and it, you know, could become a law, like, very shortly. So it creates a big distraction.
Yeah, I think that is the worry going into an election year, is that we're not going to have anyone talking about policies. Yeah. We're just going to have people talking about, oh, is this person dodgier than this person? What's the biggest scandal? Who's the next downfall? When in fact we should be talking about, like, oh, you know, how do we actually increase productivity and all of this stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. 4th issue of our 5 is on SME policy. Now, government has just gone out on consultation for payment terms. Now, the reason why I talk about this is a lot of people say governments do nothing for small businesses, right? Successive governments. And I thought, okay, when I saw this announcement happen yesterday, I thought this is a really good opportunity for small businesses to, rather than have a moan, actually be proactive. The consultation is on bigger businesses, whether or not government should legislate that they have to pay on time rather than effectively getting a free line of credit by pushing off invoices.
Right.
Did you have any thoughts on that, like legislating to make big businesses pay up on time, or even just SMEs in general?
I mean, I didn't realize this was such a huge problem. I mean, most companies work month to month anyway.
Absolutely. Especially SMEs.
Yeah, I mean, they don't have like this massive bank in the back that's just like, I'm holding on to all the money.
Exactly.
Majority of the time, they're just waiting for the money to come in from the other person as well.
Exactly. I've definitely done that.
And so I think, you know, I don't know much about this, but I think there's like a possible chain reaction where you've got like one person who's like, yeah, I need the money because the government says you have to pay me by this date. And you're like, yeah, but that person hasn't. And then you're like, well, I don't have 50 grand in my bank. I can't pay you. And then all of a sudden everything collapses.
I think that for me, hearing from what some other people have said, not in my industry, but just on the grapevine, is that a good first step is government departments, if they've got suppliers, to pay them on their terms. Because I have heard that there's been government departments.
So if they can't get their own house in order, oh dear.
Which I think, and if there's any SMEs out there, you know, if you own your own small business and it's happened to you, just make sure that you put in your submission, because it's the exact same kind of process. Well, not exact same, but it's the same principle behind what Brooke was talking about earlier on in the show, that you can have your voice heard. You just have to have a little bit of effort and take a little bit of time and put in your submission.
Yep.
5th story, which is the $50 million lotto jackpot.
It's not me.
What would you do with $50 million?
Oh, wow.
You wouldn't be number 3 on that list, eh? Or would you?
I would give it all to charity.
Wow.
No, I wouldn't.
The charity of Holly Bennett.
I think I'd be... I would invest a lot of it.
Yeah.
Into like startups. Probably become like an angel investor of some sort.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I know who your first person pitching would be.
Yeah, no, I love like new ideas.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
if I had a whole bunch of money, I'd be all about that.
That's fantastic.
I could see like a Dragon's Den show in there. That would be so much fun.
Oh, get you on TV too.
Yeah, that'd be great.
There'll be some more newspaper articles about
but
you.
I'd also buy a house. That'd be nice. And maybe a nice batch somewhere in Italy or something.
Yeah. In Italy?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
You know, like on the is it called the Cinqueterra or something? Like those little houses that are all colourful next to the ocean.
My knowledge of batches is like whangamta. Like that's when you said batch, I was like, oh, Coromandel. Like,
no, they go for real cheap in Italy because no one wants to live there. You can buy like a whole like city for a couple of bucks.
For a couple of bucks?
Yeah.
What are we doing here?
I think there's all these little asterisks underneath all that. But
oh yeah, like you don't own it and someone can take it from you.
I don't know, more like it's falling down and it's got earthquake damage.
Oh God.
But,
okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's been amazing to have you on the show. Thank you so much. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to give you your pen and paper, and I'm going to get you to write your note for next week's guest.
Do I know who it is?
Well, I think that you might. I don't know. He's very opinionated. He ruffles a lot of feathers.
It sounds like politics.
Ashley Church, who's a housing and political commentator.
Oh, okay.
So he was on Q&A in the weekend, I think, talking about, the housing crisis and how it's not United Nations, not impinging on United Nations.
Yes, I remember this.
And so it's caused a lot of furore
Yeah.
in terms of, like, is it not, Anyway,
Yeah.
so I'm excited to have him on because...
I actually think Eric Crampton had a good follow-up piece to that.
Oh, really?
He was like, yeah, maybe it is a housing crisis, but you know what? All the solutions are not the ones that you've said.
So,
sorry.
You are going to write a note to Ashley.
Okay.
And he is going to open it and read it on the show. Piece of paper for you.
Thank you.
Pen.
How does he spell Ashley? With a Y?
Yep.
Okay.
What, did you think it was with an I?
No, there's some people with 2 E's.
Oh, like that. It's like, what?
Yeah, Ashley.
Yeah.
Um,
And then the other thing, as our regular watchers will know, that we get our guests to do, is because I have to make a tally board. I'm just interested to know what is the most popular fruit burst flavour within our political society. So please refrain from doing it by colour. I did say that to David as well. Don't choose the yellow ones.
Choice. My favourite, I would say my favourite is the strawberry, to be honest.
Oh, I think that you're the first person on the show to choose that.
Really?
I think so.
I need those friends. So I can have the pick of the bunch. Yeah, no, that's great.
Cool. All right. We know where you stand on the fruit burst debate. So we'll leave you to finish.
You say that like I was very forceful.
What? Fruit burst debate.
We know where you stand.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Well, we know where you stand on a lot of things. That's good. So thank you so much for tuning in this week, everyone. If you are around next week, 3:30, we will be live with Ashley Church talking all things politics and housing. He will also be opening Brooke's note, which I can see looks like it's going to be a bit of a novel. So.
Oh yeah, no, I'll put it in like 8-point font. And I'll go on the other side too.
So as Brooke does that, we're going to wrap up the show. Thank you so much for tuning in. And of course, if you want to touch base with Brooke, she's on all socials.
Oh yeah, I've got an Instagram, a LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter.
So absolutely send her through.
I don't think I missed anything there.
Well, do you have a TikTok?
Oh, no, I don't have one of those.
Okay,
I don't think I'll ever get one of those.
Yeah, no, I'm waiting for the first MP that comes in and tells me they've got a TikTok, and I'll probably just walk out.
No, I'm terrible at dancing, so I don't think that could ever work, to be honest.
So if you have any partai questions, follow up on anything that we've discussed today, or just want to talk about politics in general, feel free to reach out to Brooke. I'm sure that she's more than happy to answer any questions that you have. And we'll see you again next week on the show, 3:30 with Ashley Church. Ka kite.